Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. One of the important parts of the UPSC civil service journey is reading of the newspaper. If there is Bible, Gita or Quran when it comes to the civil service journey, it is the newspaper which is the most important asset for the civil servant aspirants. So how to read the newspaper, what information has to be extracted will be taught by Byju's IAS in one of the free workshops which will explain you how to read newspaper for civil service examination. This is scheduled to be conducted on 26 September 2021 and this session will be conducted by Mukesh Jasa. How do you register? Follow the link given in the description box, give the necessary information and you would be able to attend this free workshop. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says when global firms disengage, employment suffers. The article here is speaking about the unemployment crisis unfolding in India and what are the measures that have to be taken by the government as well as by the private agencies. First up, we had the labor statistics which was released by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. According to this particular statistic, unemployment rate has increased from around 7% in July to 8.3% for August 2021. If we have to look at numbers in absolute terms, employment shrunk from 399.7 million in July to 397.8 million in the month of August. That means about 1.9 million jobs were lost within a span of 1 month. Where did we lose the jobs? That is in the farming sector. What exactly happens in the farming sector? In the farming sector, what we have is the seasonal nature of agriculture. They are employed as per the seasons and after this season, they are generally not employed. But there are other sectors after this period which employs them. But now, because of the COVID-19 issue, because of the crisis prevalent in the Indian economy, they were not absorbed in the other sectors. So where did we lose the jobs? It is in the farm industry. The other non-farm industry sector was able to accommodate the jobs, but still the number of people who lost the jobs have increased over a period of time. So if we consider the seasonal labor released from the agriculture, they generally get accommodated in the construction sector, the real estate sector, the construction of roads, the construction of infrastructure, construction of buildings. So all those people who generally would have lost their jobs due to the seasonal nature of agriculture were initially and in the earlier scenarios were employed in the construction sector. But what is happening right now? The problem is in the construction sector, not much activities are seen. Why? That is because of the COVID-19. That is because people are not buying the houses. There is not much of infrastructural activities that is taking place. So where is the problem? The problem is these people who lost their jobs in the farm industry are currently not being accommodated in the construction industry. Added to this, ideally, there should have been manufacturing sector, high-end services, which should have also accommodated some sections of the people as well. Even there, the manufacturing sector, especially the automobile industry, is not able to cater to the needs of those people who have lost their jobs. So what are the measures that ideally should be taken? Whenever there is a scenario where people are not able to get employment, the market is not able to accommodate the people are devoid of jobs. In such a case, what we require is the public investments. What are these public investments? These are the investments made by the government of the respective country. In this particular backdrop, let's go back to the year 1929. What did we have? We had the depression. What happened during the depression? During that particular period, if you have to compare United States of America with the Soviet Union, United States of America suffered huge losses, but Soviet Union was able to withstand the losses. It was able to reinvent itself during that period. That is because of the public investments. Let's go back to the 2008. Again, we did have issue. We did have the recession as well. During that period, the public investments made by India was able to withstand the unemployment crisis. So whenever there is an unemployment crisis, people are not getting employed. What is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is that government has to spend excessively in the market so that there is employment generation. It is not only the responsibility of the government. The private agencies, the private investments will also have to be pumped in as well. So what should the government of India do? The government of India should ensure that schemes and measures and other incentives are given to the private investors so that they pump in their money into the market. That is one of the ways at the domestic level. But what if we want the foreign companies, foreign industries, foreign people to also come and invest in India during an economic crisis? That is what is called as the liberalization of the foreign direct investments. So what happens? On one side, you're giving incentives to the local companies so that the local companies invest in the market, but you also want the foreign companies to also invest in India, bring the technology into India, ensure that they make investments for a period of 10 years and more. This is what is called as foreign direct investment. They are making investments in the infrastructural development, provide job opportunities, provide employment opportunities, and as a result, what you see is boost in the economy and the employment regeneration. But what is happening of late when it comes to the foreign direct investments? These foreign direct investments, yes, they do create jobs directly as well as indirectly as well. But the problem with the foreign direct investment is of late there is corporate restructuring that is taking place at the global level, and there are firms that are exiting from their erstwhile location. Let's take the example of Ford. What is Ford? Ford is one of the automobile industries. This particular company was active in India, was able to participate in India, did provide jobs in India, but recently it did say to the government of India that it is suspending its activities and withdrawing its operations. Why? According to Ford, it meant that it was not able to make profits in India, which is why it was withdrawing from India. So, what is happening here? For the past many years, Ford had introduced multiple cars into Indian market. It was able to establish a business logistical chain as well. It was able to provide jobs directly and indirectly. How jobs directly? It used to recruit people directly into the Ford system, and indirectly where there were other companies which had tie up with Ford, and they were also provided with economic opportunity. Now since the Ford is withdrawing from India, there will be consequences, disastrous consequences for the unemployment. What would happen? The direct employees might lose out on their jobs, the indirect employees might also lose out on their jobs, and ultimately what we would have is these people looking for more jobs and opportunities. This is where the author brings into picture the importance of the auto sector in India. When it comes to the auto sector, it employs as many as 19.1 million workers. But during this particular period, it was also anticipated that during 2021-2022, more number of people will be employed. Why? That is because there was a boost for the auto industry. However, there is a problem in the auto sector right now. What are the problems? One, people are not taking these vehicles. One is primarily because of the coronavirus. They are all restricted to their homes. There is work from home opportunity. They are not commuting from one place to another, and they are also apprehensive what would happen to their health as well. So they are not moving that much, which is where the auto industry is hit because of the COVID-19. This is one such problem. The second problem is in the shortage of the semiconductors. If you have realized there is a semiconductor shortage, all the automobile industries were impacted by it. In fact, Tata Motors was hit. We have Maruti Suzuki, which was also hit. Mahindra, which was also hit as well. So all these companies who require semiconductors for their automobile sector were hit because of the shortage of the semiconductor at the global level. And as a result, large number of employees were thrown out from the automobile industry, and ultimately these people were the ones who have been the major sufferers. So because of the Ford exit, because of the non-availability of the semiconductor chips, because of no activity during the coronavirus, large number of employees had to lose out on their jobs. This is one such example. Let's take other example as well. If we have to consider the global restructuring, this is what we discussed about the corporate restructuring at the global level. Let's take the example of Nokia and the Citibank. Nokia was able to manufacture large number of phones. Where was it manufacturing? It was in Sri Perumbudur in Tamil Nadu. But Nokia was not able to advance its technology. It was not able to match up to the competition that was prevalent in the market, and as a result, it completely went out of race when it comes to the mobile manufacturing. So who was the major sufferer? Nokia was the major sufferer. But since it had already made enough profits, what did it do? Since it was not able to withstand the competition from Samsung and other smartphones, it had to shut its operations in India. So who were the sufferers? It was the Indian people who were involved in this manufacturing entity, where about 8,000 permanent employees were working in 3 shifts, and other people who were also indirectly engaged were the most hit when it comes to the suspension of activity of Nokia phones. Now let's take the example of Citibank. Citibank recently announced that it would shut India retail banking business as part of a global decision to exit about 13 markets. When it comes to the Citibank, they have a concept called as cream skimming. What is this cream skimming? They operate mostly in the urban areas and not in the rural areas. Why? That is because according to this principle of cream skimming, most of the activities take place in the urban areas. People who are wealthy stay in the urban areas. They will have a lot of transaction. They will also seek money from the banking system. So most of the operations happen in the urban areas, where they give loans to the much better economic policy made in the urban areas. But they do not operate in the rural areas, primarily because according to them, if the loan is given in the rural areas, that may not be repaid. So most of these banks, like the city banks, operate only in the urban areas, whose concept is called as cream skimming. What is the present situation? The US bank currently focuses on few wealthy regions around the world, and it has now said that it is planning to suspend some of the activities in the country as part of the global restructuring program. So what we actually see is that in the auto sector, in the other areas, because of the global restructuring, corporate restructuring, what we see is suspension of the activities, withdrawal from a particular country, which may lead to loss of jobs in that particular region. This will have a greater impact on the job, says the article. Why will this have impact on the jobs? Let me give you an example. First, it creates apprehension among the potential investors. Ford has withdrawn from India. Then you have Citibank, which is also withdrawing from some pockets in India. What will this do? This gives an idea to other potential investors that the political stability may not be right, or there are other issues in India, or there is corruption in India, or the ease of doing business may not be right in India. So because there are companies which are withdrawing from India, other potential investors, MNCs, individuals, high net worth businessmen would not want to invest in India, because they feel that the environment suitable for investments may not be right, and they would not be able to make profits. So the investment which is required from the private agencies, private individuals, may not happen, and this means that there will be a problem of unemployment crisis in India. That's the first problem. The second problem is in reference to the mismatches in the labor market. When these companies withdraw from India, there are two major problems that we have to witness. One, there are people who are already employed in this particular industry, auto sector, or the banking sector, or the mobile manufacturing industry. These are highly advanced people. They have been able to gauge the experience over a number of years, 10 years of experience, 15 years of experience. They have been working in that particular sector. But if this particular company is withdrawing its operations, these people will have no jobs, and ultimately they become unemployed, and they start looking for jobs in this particular sector. When they start looking for jobs, there are also juniors, which means they're just passed out of the colleges. They will also start looking for the jobs. So there'll be clash between the experienced ones and the new entrants into this particular field. So whom will the companies employ? To a larger extent, they might employ the experienced ones or the new entrants ones. But if they are employing the ones who are already in job, they might also see a pay cut during that particular period as well. That is one part of the story. The other part is those people who are already in this particular sector, if they are not accommodated into other sector, what we will see is big influx of low skilled workers into the other sectors. They do not belong to the other sector, but because you're not able to find the jobs, what we actually see is disguised employment in the other sector. In order to overcome this issue, what we require is the private investments. Yes, the government of India, the government of respective states will have to make more public investments, but at the same time, because there are companies which are withdrawing, what we require is more domestic private companies which have to make investments in that particular area which is currently having a problem. So the need of the hour is to increase the domestic capital formation, private investments to step in, and we have to wait and watch how the government of India will provide incentives to these domestic entrepreneurs. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says campaign launched for social accountability law. Before we understand what this article is all about, let's have an idea about what social accountability is all about. There are three types of countries. One is the developed countries, then we have the developing countries, then we also have the underdeveloped countries. Let's not discuss about the developed countries or the underdeveloped countries. Let's focus on the developing countries, where one of the countries that we would be taking into picture is our own country, India. When it comes to the developing countries, what do we all look at? We want the stable government. We want a democratic government. We also want well managed public institutions. Why? Because it is these institutions and the political stability which will be able to nurture multiple sectors in India. Let's take the example in India. We have a large scale poverty in India, and as Mahatma Gandhi has said, we have to remove poverty in India, and most of the poor will have to be empowered. For us to empower the poor, we have to provide them two basic amenities. One happens to be the education, next it happens to be the health. So who should be catering to this particular service? It is the government of India with its established institutions. While this particular service of education, health, water, sanitation, electricity, so on and so forth is provided by the government of India and the respective state governments, how will the government be able to accommodate it? There are multiple ways. One, you have the institutional setup of the government. So the government directly engages in such an activity, or it might outsource or give this particular contract, which is called as contracting out to a private sector. So the government may ask the private agency to execute a particular project. So this is where contracting out taking place. Or we will also have the government, or in fact independently the NGOs operating as well, where they would be able to ensure that such criterias of health, education, electricity, sanitation, so on and so forth is provided to the people. Let's set aside the private sector and the NGOs, but let's assume for a moment there is only government and its institutions which is working for the people in providing the services. What if the government is not able to keep up to the pace? What if there are some failures in the execution of this particular project? What if the government is not keeping the transparency and accountability in picture? So just like in democracy, where the government is expecting us to showcase the transparency, how? By using of the PAN cards, by making sure that Aadhaar is in picture, it is making sure that there is income tax which is paid. So it wants transparency expected from the people. At the same time, when it comes to the democratic principles, people also want transparency from the government. So as part of this transparency, the government will have to cater to the viewpoints of the people, which is called as social accountability. Let me elaborate this further. When it comes to the accountability, we have the institutional accountability, which is also called as horizontal mechanism of accountability. What is this horizontal mechanism? This is where we have the established institutions which ensure that the government is operating within the contours of law, within the contours of the constitution. Let's take the example of political mechanism. What is this political mechanism? Let's say we have the government established by the constitution. So if the government is not working, is failing to execute a particular project, is not meeting the original objective as envisaged by the constitution and laws, how will they be checked for their accountability? We have opposition political parties which will question them. We also have the legislature which will question them. We will also have legislative committees and commissions which will ask the government, why are you not functioning? That is what is called as political mechanism. Then we have the fiscal mechanism. Whether the government is functioning in a right way or not, that will be checked by auditing and financial accounting. For example, CAG. So what we have is the auditing that will come into picture when it comes to the fiscal mechanism. Then we have the administrative mechanism. This is where we have the hierarchy, the intra-departmental and the interdepartmental. Let's say, for example, hierarchical reporting, norms of the public sector probity, codes of conduct, rules that are in picture, procedures that are established, all this become the form of the administrative mechanism. So you will have the hierarchical setup that is established. So the secretary will be asking the directors and other officers. So you have an hierarchical setup, which means there is administrative mechanism to keep a check of accountability and transparency. Finally, we will also have the legal mechanisms as well. That is the corruption control agency. We will have the ombudsman system as well, and we will also have judiciary in place to question the government and also keep the accountability baton high. But in spite of all of this, if they are not meeting the standards of accountability, who will step into picture? It is the people. What is democracy? Democracy is government of the people, by the people and for the people. Since it is for the people, they have to know if the government is working in the right way or not. This is where we have a principle called as the demand side governance. So what is this demand side governance? Basically, the citizens, the civil society, the communities engage directly with the government, keep them accountable for their actions so that there is improvisation in the governance and public administration. A part of demand side governance is what is called as social accountability. So what is this social accountability? This is basically an approach whereby there is civic engagement with the government, where ordinary citizens, civil society organizations directly participate, or they can also participate indirectly and seek the accountability from the government. So various actions, tools, mechanisms of the civil society organisms making use of the media as well as elected representatives directly being questioned comes into picture to ensure that there is accountability of the government and the public officials, in fact the administrative officials as well. So some of the principles of social accountability includes jankari, which is information, bhagidari, involvement and participation of citizens, karyavahi, time bound action, suraksha, protection of citizens, sunwai, citizens right to be heard, janta ka manch, collective platform, and prasar, where there is report dissemination. So if all these principles come into picture, what we see is the objective of social accountability being in place, which is an important aspect of governance. Why is this social accountability important? That is because when it comes to accountability of the public officials, it is very important for the effective functioning of the democracy. If there is accountability, we will have the improvised developmental outcomes, and at the same time the public service delivery will be responsive, sensitive, and what we will have is an accountable government to the people of that country. And at the same time, overall, this will also improvise the policy making. It will have a larger implication of empowering the poor, and ultimately the poverty can be eliminated, transparency can be enhanced, and people can constantly check what the government is up to. In the present situation, what we have is the Rajasthan government, which is supposed to introduce one of the social accountability bill. If we go back to the year 2019, Rajasthan government constituted a committee under the retired IAS officer Ram Lubia to examine the previous draft. What was this previous draft? They already had the Rajasthan Guaranteed Delivery of Public Services Act of 2011. They also had the Rajasthan Right of Hearing Act. So this IAS officer looks into both these laws and says that these two acts will have to be repealed and they have to come up with a newer law for the social accountability. So what is the social accountability? This is where the government will give responsive action plans what it has done to the people in that state. So this is to seek the accountability of public functionaries and authorities for timely delivery of goods and services, create democratic, decentralized and participative approach to enable wider public participation, to initiate monitoring of programs and policies through community scorecards, citizens report as well as social audit. To bring this into practice, Rajasthan was to come up with a bill, introduce multiple changes. So the discussion is what is this article all about? But our primary intention of this discussion is that you understand what is this social accountability all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says complex count. We have the government of India, which has recently clarified in the Supreme Court that a caste-based census of the backward classes is administratively difficult and cumbersome. The government goes about discussing this difficulty in administrative census. That is because when you go back to the pre-independence period where census of caste was conducted, it was not complete and was not accurate, says the government of India. Since the pre-independence period, we were not able to collect the caste census, and after the independence in the year 2011, we also conducted the socio-economic and caste census as well. That was also replete with technical flaws as well. Before independence, the data and statistics that were collected was not complete and accurate, and in the year 2011, we also had the socio-economic caste census, which was also beset with technical flaws as well. Why is the government saying so? That is because if we have to focus on the decadal census, which is supposed to be conducted in 2021, we have multiple problems of conducting the caste census. If we conduct the caste census, the whole importance will be given to the caste identity, but the real importance that is supposed to be given to the decadal census will not come into picture. So the government goes on to say importance should be given to the regular census, and this should be not at the cost of the caste census. So they are not giving importance to the caste census, says the government of India. Added to this, if we have to consider the socio-economic and caste census, there were multiple issues back then as well. One, if they go and investigate about the caste, there will be caste names which might look similar. There will be thousands of names of a same caste as well, and there will be phonetic variations, there will be similarities as well. So what we will have is huge number of caste lists as well as the subcaste. So the government goes about saying that we have seen the complexities and difficulties in the past. So in the present situation right now, we would not be conducting the caste based census. What data would be conducted as part of the regular census? As part of the regular census, only SC/ST data will be collected, but the OBC or the caste census data will not be collected, says the government of India. However, the author in this particular case speaks about the importance of the caste based census. What does the author say? The author in this particular case believes in what Ambedkar has said. Ambedkar had believed that in order for the society to reform, what we require is the annihilation of the caste. What we require is the casteless society in place. But this will be an eventual process. This will be a gradual process. This is the ultimate destination. But for all of them to evolve over a period of time, what we require is the affirmative action programs which has to be taken by the government of India as well as the respective state governments. To make the casteless society, we have to ensure that there is equity in the society, we have to ensure that people have economic independence, for which what the government should have to do is affirmative action. Because of the historical past where divisions have happened only because of the caste, these castes will have to be put on an egalitarian society, and eventually what we will lead to is a casteless society. Added to this, the judiciary in the past has also requested for the quantifiable data. How many people of a specific caste will have to be put into this particular affirmative action plan? If reservations is given to them, employment opportunity or educational opportunities reservation have to be given. Why is that the government is giving them? How many people in this particular caste are not doing well? All of this will have to be given by the executive to the court of law. So the government in this particular case will have to conduct the caste based census so that they have the quantifiable data which has been asked by the judiciary in the past. So the author says caste based census is a must. It is required in the present situation, says the author. Yes, there will be complexities. Yes, there will be inaccuracies. But what should the government of India do? The government of India should initiate and start off with the program. The government says that there are number of castes and subcastes, but this should happen at the district level, where if they have similar names, if they have similar cultural values, if they also have similar ideas about the caste identity, such caste will have to be jailed under one single caste. So within a caste there are multiple subcastes. So these subcastes, if they have similar names, they all have to be jailed into one parent caste. So it has to be initiated, says the author. Therefore, it is very important that we have the numbers so that the ultimate idea of casteless society is taken into picture. So the author says that the goal of casteless society is the need of the hour, and this can happen, will happen only when we ensure that there is affirmative action process initiated for the equity egalitarian society in the picture. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Examine how the exit of high profile global firms affect unemployment generation in India. Next question, discuss the importance of social accountability in democracy. So please write all your answers on the comment section. If you want to upload an image, you would be able to visit our website and also upload the image as well. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.